Thank you. Okay, I think we want to call this meeting to order. So if we could just have the conversations kind of ratchet down a little bit. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for your patience. I happen to have been in another meeting. We're calling this meeting of the TRPA Environmental Improvement Program Committee to order. The date is Wednesday, September 25th, and it is 9:51 a.m. The first item on the agenda is a roll call. Maria, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Conrad Seda. Here. Ms. Faustinos.
Here.
Ms. Hayes.
Here.
Ms. Lane.
Here.
Mr. Rice.
Here.
Mr. Settlemeyer.
Here.
Ms. Williamson. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you. I will now go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For members of the public who are joining us remotely, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov under the calendar header, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for September 25th, 2024. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address committee members directly with your comments, please raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear the public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. Comments on items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comments before the committee takes any action. For remote committee members, if you wish to speak, you can also now raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Remote committee members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment, and you will be called to the front to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment and speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you are viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure that your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent audio feedback into the room. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Staff, do you have any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, there are no changes to the
Great.
agenda.
Thank you very much. We will then deem the agenda approved as posted, and we will go on to approval of minutes. That's agenda item number 2. We have a draft set of minutes from March 27th, 2024 EIP committee member on page 29 of your packet. Does any member of the committee wish to make a change? No? Okay. If not, then I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor?
Move to approve.
So your motion.
Move to approve.
Great. Okay. So moved. Now, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any abstentions? Objections? All right, motion passes. We're next on to item number 3, and that is Restoration and Resilience Strategic Plan, Strategic Priority Update. And the information on this item can be found on page 177 of your packet. Since this item is informational only, members of the public are welcome to comment at the final public comment period. And I'm now going to pass it along to Kim Carringer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're really excited to have this meeting today because our last meeting was back in March, and it was right after our trip to Washington, D.C. And we did a debrief on, the multi-partner trip back there and our work on the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. So we have lots of big updates to bring you today on that and the overall restoration and resilience strategic priorities. So this is going to be a joint presentation between myself, our director, Julie Reagan, and then Shannon Friedman. And we're going to try to move quickly so we get through this committee by 10:30, so we start on time. So if we're talking fast, that's why. So next slide. So just quick context setting. I know you all remember what the Environmental Improvement Program is, but it is our multi-jurisdictional, collaborative, proactive capital investment program for the basin to accelerate reaching our environmental goals that we call thresholds. So we've completed more than 800 projects since 1997 in the inception. We have 4 main focus areas: watersheds and water quality, forest health, sustainable recreation and transportation, science, stewardship, and accountability. And our strategic priority really focuses on increasing the pace and scale of implementation of this program. We've seen some really great progress on achieving some of our goals and thresholds, such as like our stream environment zone threshold that we mentioned last time. We are going to be bringing an overview from Shannon on project implementation and where we want to go next with the threshold evaluation. So that's what we'll cover today. Next slide. Here's kind of the main elements and components of our restoration and resilience strategic priority. We here at TRPA lead and convene the EIP partnership. So Julie Reagan's going to be talking about some of the work we've been doing in that realm, building sustainable funding strategies for the EIP, like the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, many other funding sources that we're really trying to build to increase the pace and scale, expand our EIP communications and engagement, and really build awareness and support for this program basin-wide and through, the country and the world. I'll cover those 3 in my slides, and then I'll hand it over to, Julie and I will. Then I'll hand it over to Shannon to talk about how we're prioritizing implementing projects for regional benefit, cutting the green tape. And we have Dan Segan at the next presentation to talk about achieving our key environmental goals and thresholds. So next slide. So like I mentioned, the last time we met, we had our trip to Washington, D.C. We've been doing a lot of work since then on leading and convening the EIP partnership through the collaboration of many different partners, more than 80. The summit, many of you were able to attend that and really bring a national spotlight to the environmental improvement program and the work that we're doing. And on a weekly, monthly, daily basis, we're working with the Tahoe interagency executives and our staff to prioritize projects, fund projects, really track our progress and see our tangible progress on the ground. And so I want to hand it over to Julie Reagan to talk about the progress since our last trip to DC.
Thank you, Kim. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I'll take the next slide. We've had an amazing amount of progress, and I wanted to be the first in this public meeting to celebrate the fact that the House floor, last night on the House floor, the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act was voted unanimously. And there was some procedural interesting mechanisms to get there. And I want to tell you a little bit about that. But this reflects the hard work of this board, of the community, of what we call the broader partnership of Team Tahoe. And it was just a high honor for TRPA to be mentioned in numerous proceedings in Congress and even in the discussion around that vote last night on the House floor. And what you would think, just taking one line in a bill and changing the date of 2024 to 2034 would be very easy. That should have been a no-brainer. This is the second session of Congress that we've been working on this. So if you recall, we had gone through the Senate in the last session of Congress, and we could not get it through the House. And there were various reasons for that, but we went right down to the wire a couple of years ago, and we didn't get the job done, much to the chagrin of our delegation. We redoubled our efforts. This was introduced over a year and a half ago, and we were fully prepared to have this be attached to a larger legislative vehicle. Last go round in 2016, we had attached to the Water Resources Development Act. Then it was called the WIN Act. That's the big infrastructure bill, a lot of Army Corps funding. And so we had been working with that committee staff because we thought that was most likely the legislative vehicle that we would attach to. Then the summit happened. And as Kim said, the summit, as we all like to say, I think it was actually Secretary Wade Crowfoot that used the term forcing function. The summit is our forcing function of Tahoe, and it galvanizes support across party lines, across state lines, and we come together to really row in that same direction. And in this case, the Restoration Act was our top priority to get this done because the act is expiring on September 30th. after 7 years of authorized funds. And we only have had 120 million appropriated on the full authorization of 415 million. So essentially there's $300 million on the table. And we asked for more time on the congressional clock to have those dollars appropriated over the following 10 years. And so what we had happened since the summit, Kevin Kiley, our Congress member, our new member on the California side, announced at the summit, which was a very bold move to say, I'm going to get us a hearing in the House Natural Resources Committee. And he and Congressman Amodei, by state, worked very hard to make that happen. And it happened. And then if you go back to the slide, Tracy, a couple back, there's the House Natural Resources Committee. There's Congressman Kiley with a picture of Lake Tahoe, support Lake Tahoe behind him. And I had the very high honor to testify. And there were multiple bills that were up in that Natural Resources Subcommittee on federal lands. So the testimony was last Wednesday. And then fast forward to a week, we had the bill marked up. It was passed out of committee the following day, last Thursday, and then last night. And so if you just go to the next slide, please, there is Chairman Westerman, Bruce Westerman, who is the chair of the full committee on natural resources, making remarks about Tahoe, about the work that we're doing, about this landscape scale conservation program called the Environmental Improvement Program, and what a national model we've become. He actually came to Lake Tahoe. Congressman Mark Amodei brought him here, and TRPA and our partners participated in a forest health tour. He is a forester by training, and he was so interested in what we're doing and held that up as a model of collaboration, of a beautiful environment that we have very high standards, very strict regulations, but the active forest management and home hardening that we've been doing in Tahoe was cited in his remarks. And then if you go to the next slide, as Tracy had shown a moment ago, then we had Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who I would venture to say doesn't often agree with Bruce Westerman on a lot of issues. And here they both are testifying on the House floor about Tahoe, about our partnerships, about this being a new normal for collaboration across party lines. And then we had the next slide, Congressman Kiley. And then we also had one more slide, I think. Oh, no, we missed Congressman Amodei as well, but Congressman is both of the members of our House delegation spoke on the floor last night. And then if you go to the next slide, this is where I was. I was at Round Hill Pines because it's closing for the season and had to get one more sunset in. And I was watching this on my phone on C-SPAN. And I was watching these little kids like climbing up on the stacked chairs because they're cleaning the beach and jumping down. I think I might have one more. Maybe not. No, I don't. We can go back to that one. So it was just an actual surreal moment to see families and friends and children playing on the shores of Lake Tahoe at this very moment when the House floor is voting our bill forward so that the president can sign it and we can have the Restoration Act reauthorized. It was, as one of our board members has said a few times during meetings, Ben Kiekeffer, it was a mission moment. It was a mission moment to be looking out at the lake, to see the sunset, to have, families enjoying our public lands, looking at that beautiful lake and knowing how much more work we have to do. And now we have Lake Tahoe Restoration Act soon to be signed into law by the president. So just wanted to give you a little more play-by-play behind the scenes and to thank you all for your support going forward. This has been many years in the making.
Yeah. So I just want to take a moment and congratulate all of us. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is truly momentous, and I think we need to all take a breath and appreciate that this has happened. And I feel really good about what hopefully is going to happen in the Senate soon, and hopefully we'll have a bill signing next month.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then I will pass this back to Kim Carringer, but thanks for indulging a little more color behind the procedural aspects of what was actually very complicated. I'll share one more. The bill that the House voted out last night was a Senate bill. And so just to have with all the other HR numbers and S612, because it had already gone through the Senate and to save time, they didn't rename it with a House Resources. So procedurally, it was acrobatics. And all the rest of it was Tahoe's, it was the clean air of Tahoe. Everyone must have breathed in to make that moment happen. So I'll turn it back to Kim.
Thank you, Julie. So you all have in front of you, and the public has this online, the communications team really pulled together here at TRPA to issue a special edition of Tahoe in Depth this year. We usually do 2 a year in collaboration with many of our EIP partners. And we were able to achieve a stretch goal that we set for ourselves as part of this strategic priority and issue a 3rd, because it was such a momentous event to memorialize and really show all of the work that all of the EIP partnership put into this event and what it's led to. So take a look at that. It's out there in front of you or online for the public. We also publish an accomplishments report every year that really shows what EIP progress we've made and the big projects that have either been in planning, implementation, completed, the progress we're making. And then this coming year, we've launched a new e-news that's called Profiles on Progress, and that's really focused on showing EIP implementation and really getting the word out there to the public of the work that's getting done on the ground. And on top of that, this year we've prioritized looking again at our branding and communications for the environmental improvement program. We have a pretty strong brand recognition of the EIP. It's been in place now for 28 years. We've updated the logo and branding a couple times. So we want to just continue to make sure we look at that with our partners and keep that brand identity, but also make sure it's resonating with new audiences and see how we can continue to expand the reach. So we'll be focusing on that this year, and we'll bring that back at a later update of how that's progressing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Shannon Friedman, one of our senior planners, to give an update on EIP projects implementation.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, Madam Chair and EIP committee members. My name is Shannon Friedman, and I get the fun part of talking about projects today. I'm going to focus on projects over the 4 EIP focus areas and projects that have real regional significance in achieving the goals of the EIP. Next slide. So we'll start with forest health projects. The map on the right shows all of the forest health projects that are planned for implementation over the next 5+ years. So you can see there's a ton of projects that are slated to happen. I'm just giving you a snapshot of projects, and again, ones that have regional significance or will be coming back to the board for approval, or this committee or the board for informational updates. These are projects that reduce hazardous fuels across the landscape and help make our forests more resilient to disease, climate change, and reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire. And to date, over 94,000 acres of forests have been treated in this in the basin. So a lot of work has been done, but a lot more coming. Next slide, please. So these are some projects I wanted to highlight. Oh, yeah, right there. So the Homewood Forest Fuels Reduction Project, the governing board approved just recently in June of this year, and they're actually starting construction this week on removing dead trees across their landscape. This includes 252 acres of private land that will be treated to improve the health of those forests, reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire, and protect Homewood infrastructure as well. And this is a significant project because it's a large private contribution to the EIP, which is very important. Next, I'll touch on Lake Tahoe West. This is a large project that will treat all of the land on the West Shore that is on Forest Service land. The Forest Service is leading this project, and they're currently in the process of doing an environmental analysis to look at alternatives for the best way to treat that landscape, as well as analyze the impacts. That EA will be released soon, and we will be bringing an update on that project to the governing board at some time in the future at the appropriate time. Community wildfire protection plans are basically the local plans to address wildland fires, and all of the fire districts are currently updating their community wildfire protection plans, and we will bring an update on those plans to the governing board in the future. Other projects occurring are the utility resilient corridors, both NV Energy on the Nevada side and Liberty Utilities on the California side, are continue to implement projects that reduce trees within their utility corridors to protect their infrastructure and protect the communities from catastrophic wildfire. And then the Forest Service is moving forward with removing hazardous trees from the Caldor fire, which is important to get in there and remove that tree stock, so they're not hazardous to the environment or to people. Next slide, please. The next category is watersheds and water quality. Again, the map on the right shows all of the projects that are occurring. The goal of this is to maintain and improve lake clarity, restore ecosystem health and resilience, and improve habitat. This is accomplished through stream restoration and meadow restoration projects, implementing water quality improvement projects on the built environment, such as commercial development and our roadways. To date, 842 miles of roadway have been treated to reduce erosion and stormwater pollution from entering into Lake Tahoe, which is very significant because those urban uplands, like our roadways in development, have been identified as a contributor to lake clarity decline. Next slide, please. So some projects to highlight in this category include the City of South Lake Tahoe, Tahoe Valley Stormwater and Greenbelt Improvement Project. This project will be treating roadways within the City of South Lake Tahoe, and it also is implementing a segment of trail that will make connections to other trails that exist within that area. So a great multi-benefit project that is currently being implemented and will be complete either this year or next year. The Burke Creek Restoration Project is a joint project being implemented on Forest Service land in cooperation with the Nevada Tahoe Conservation District. That project is currently being implemented and will restore 22 acres of stream and meadow habitat and 1,000 linear feet of stream channel restoration. The governing board just recently certified the Meeks Bay Restoration EIS, which was a great milestone for that project. The Forest Service is leading that project, and they are moving into design for actual implementation, and any implementation for that TRPA takes an action on will come back to the board, and we'll certainly provide an update on that project. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the Upper Truckee River. This watershed is a high priority for restoration. It's the largest watershed in the Lake Tahoe Basin, and it's also heavily impacted by development and historic uses such as grazing. It has been broken up into reaches that can be implemented on their own based on just geology and land ownership. Several restoration projects have already occurred, but there's a lot still to come, and they will all come back to the board for approval. This includes implementation of restoration on the Motel 6 property that was recently acquired by the California Tahoe Conservancy, a huge milestone and long-term goal of the EIP that was achieved. And the Conservancy is now moving in towards plans for demolition, and then we'll move on to planning the actual restoration. The California Department of Parks and Recreation owns a segment that goes through Lake Tahoe Golf Course, and they are currently in the process of finalizing the environmental impact report, which is also a joint environmental impact statement for TRPA. And we will be coming back to the board for certification of that EIS and project approval in the coming years. And then, as you're aware, the Tahoe Resource Conservation District was able to acquire the Johnson Meadow, which was also a private owned holding a few years ago, and they're working on plans to restore that. And at the appropriate time, we'll come to the board for approval of that project as well. Next slide. In the Aquatic Invasive Species Program, there's two goals, really, to prevent the introduction of new aquatic invasive species and eradicate or control the spread of new species. To date, over 113,000 boats have been inspected, and it has been successful at introducing new aquatic invasive species from motorized boats. And 332 acres have been treated to remove existing aquatic invasive species across the landscape. Some projects to highlight include the Taylor-Talac Aquatic Invasive Plant Removal Project. This project was implemented, it started implementation in the fall of 2002. This included 17 acres of bottom barriers installed across Taylor-Talac creeks and wetlands to eradicate aquatic invasive plants. And that project has been successful, and we are currently moving into the next phase of removing all of those barriers. So a really big milestone for that project. The Tahoe Keys Control Method Test, which you all are familiar with, is wrapping up 3 years of the actual testing. And then they will do a 3-year report, as well as a final report that synthesizes all of the data. They'll deliver that at a science symposium, and we will also bring an update of that back to the board. And then lastly, we have the permanent aquatic invasive species inspection stations to inspect boats to prevent the introduction of new aquatic invasive species. To date, we've operated these at temporary spots where we need to get permits, leases. There's not a lot of room for permanent infrastructure. So developing permanent stations is a priority for the program. And we have 2 planned. The Spooner AIS station is planned at Spooner Summit in combination with a Spooner Mobility Hub. And that should be implemented starting next year and will be a 2025-2026 implementation project. And that is being implemented in cooperation with TRPA, TTD, NDOT, Nevada Division of State Lands, Douglas County, and the Tahoe Resource Conservation District. And then in California, we're also pursuing a permanent station in Myers. We're able to take advantage of some California Tahoe Conservancy asset lands to develop a permanent AIS station there. Next slide, please. So here's the projects that are planned in sustainable recreation and transportation. And the goal here is to preserve air quality, improve the recreation experience while protecting natural resources and increase alternative modes of transportation. To date, 198 miles of bike and pedestrian facilities have been constructed and 3,386 feet of public shoreline have been added. Next slide. Some upcoming projects include a roundabout at Pioneer Trail and the US 50 intersection, the South Tahoe Greenway across Johnson Meadow. This is an important segment of the Greenway. The Greenway is a bike trail that will, when it's complete, connect Myers all the way to State Line. This is a segment that will go through Johnson Meadow and include replacing a bridge over the Upper Truckee River that was destroyed during recent winter storm events. That will be coming to the board for approval. There's a lot happening on both the State Route 28 and State Route 89 corridors. We gave an update on both those corridors to the board a few months ago. But as projects are implemented throughout those corridors, we will come back to the board. On 28, that includes the Spooner Mobility Hub and the AIS station will be, the next project on board that will be coming for approval. Along the 89 corridor, the feasibility report was done that we provided you an update on. And the next step for that is really convening all the partners to figure out next steps and define a scope for projects to implement. Fanny Bridge was a project that was approved a long time ago. And phase 1 was completed, which included 2 roundabouts and a new road connecting them. Phase 2 will be a roundabout at the Y in the North Shore, which is the 2889 intersection, as well as replacing Fanny Bridge. The implementer of Federal Highways is currently in negotiations with the contractor to hopefully get that price to a point where it's achievable. And then Kale Complete Streets will be implemented next year. And that's a great local project that will underground utilities, provide bike lanes, sidewalks, and make that street complete and provide much needed improvements to it. Next slide, please. Under science, stewardship, and accountability, the goal here is to conduct scientific research and really use that information to improve implementation and manage our projects better based on best available science. And then also to engage communities in stewardship and utilize innovative technology. Next slide. These are some key science projects that are occurring. And then on the right is some innovative technology that is being used to help clean up the environment and support the EIP. What I want to mention about the innovative technology is this really is the private sector also contributing to the EIP. A lot of this is private companies that have developed technology that we are able to use in EIP projects to clean up the environment, like the Bebop pictured here that cleans up and picks up litter from the beaches that you can't even get to. Next slide. Here's an update of EIP projects that have been approved by the board over the last about 5 years and sort of a status on where they all are. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over them, but what you can see is a lot has been approved and all of them have either completed construction or are in the middle of construction right now. So lots of great progress. It's either happened or has been. And I just real quickly highlighted projects, but if there's any projects that you ever want more information on or a resource area, we can always do that at a future meeting. Next slide. So now I'm going to transition into cutting the green tape. To deliver these projects, it's very resource intensive. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of funding. And so as you're aware, the state of California has a statewide initiative to cut the green tape, and TRPA has been involved in that. And really the Tahoe region can and is a model for cutting the green tape. Next slide, please. A few years ago, TRPA facilitated a cutting the green tape workshop on a project that made a suite of recommendations that the Tahoe region could implement to achieve goals of cutting the green tape. The first recommendation out of that was to form a working group that really could help advance some of the recommendations. Here's a list of all of the partners that are part of that working group, and it includes federal partners and partners from both the state of California and Nevada. Next slide. The progress that this working group has made to date is establishing the working group, developing a charter. And then just recently, the Army Corps of Engineers has finalized a regional general permit for activities in Lake Tahoe. So that covers things such as laying those bottom barriers down that I talked about in the AIS section. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife has issued a restoration management permit. And we were the TRPA partners were the first agency to take advantage of that. And we were able to get a restoration management permit to cover the take of Tahoe yellowcrest, which is a protected species in the state of California. And the goal there is to be able to protect species, but streamline the process when the goal of the project is habitat enhancement. And then there is a CEQA statutory exemption for restoration projects. And the Tahoe region was able to get one of those too for the Lahontan cutthroat trout recovery. And what I'll mention about all of these permanent process improvements is that the goal really is to still protect those natural and human resources while increasing the pace and scale of restoration. And then the next slide, please. And the priorities moving forward are listed here. And I won't read through them all, but a really big goal is just to enhance communication and coordination amongst agencies and implementers so they're aware of all the cutting the green tape opportunities that they have. And I will stop there because wow. And I know that was a lot of information and I talked really fast, but in the interest of time.
Yeah, and we appreciate it. And I just want to acknowledge that this has been an amazing report with so much information.
And so I'll pause for any questions before we
and
turn it over to Dan.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Just a couple of quick, really annoying questions. You said it's 94,000 acres of activity to date. Is that, what's the to date? What's the time horizon in which those acres?
Oh, good question. So that's since the start of the EIP, so 1997.
And then another question about the size of the projects, right? Like some of these projects are 250 acres, some are just a few acres.
Yeah.
What delineates where one project stops and one a new one begins, A, and B, would a part of cutting the green tape be maybe aggregating more of these projects into a larger whole so that you can get them through environmental review in one group versus as distinct projects?
Great questions. So first, a lot of times what defines the size of a project is land ownership. So Homewood, for example, 252 acres, that's, the size of Homewood. So it's oftentimes like geography, what makes sense to implement for, that space, land ownership, and then just what's achievable financially as well within a certain time frame. So for like bike trails, for example, oftentimes we break them into achievable segments, like 1 mile to 2 miles, because that financially and resource-wise is achievable for one project. And then through cutting the green tape, yes, that is an option. And it's something to evaluate at the beginning of a project, because sometimes there is a real benefit to doing just that and combining projects and using the collaborative to implement projects. And sometimes we found that it is actually more efficient to deliver a project on its own. And it really is a case by case. But one of the goals of cutting the green tape is to look at a list of projects and kind of do that, see where there's efficiencies with working together and where there maybe isn't as many efficiencies.
Thanks. Yeah, I would just encourage you to think about common landscape features. If you're doing an environmental review and it's the same characteristics time and time again, is there a way to communicate that across a number of projects? and make sure that then the environmental review takes into account that you've already done this work. You've already, completed these types of mitigations elsewhere in the basin to allow you to potentially bring in public support and additional funding, and, essentially reduce the cost per acre or cost per mile by aggregating those projects.
Thank you, Ashley. Any other committee members wish to make comments? On the phone, I think we have Megan, I believe. Yeah, doesn't sound like it. Well, again, thank you. That is just some amazing accomplishments, in
Yeah.
particular on the cutting the green tape.
I should have started with thank you.
Yes,
It's super
yes.
impressive. So thank you.
And you have how many staff? Yeah, so thank you all. Really, really appreciate it. And I know we have quite a bit more to get onto in the agenda. So if there's no objection, we'll just go ahead into item number 4, which is discussion and possible action, a direction rather to staff on the 2023 threshold evaluation process and schedule. No small task. And information on this item can be found on page 179 of your packet. And Dan Segan is going to be making that presentation and also has done a tremendous amount of work to get us ready for this meeting. And I know it's of great interest to probably many people in the audience. So we want to give it its due attention. So we might push that 10:30 limit quite a bit, actually.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Dan Segan for the record and members of the committee. I think you've given me 7 minutes. Is that what you said? So I'll speed through the beginning on the threshold standards because I think most people on the committee are fully aware of what the threshold standards are, but just as a brief reminder, it's a term of art given to us in the bi-state compact. Next slide, please. And the threshold standards themselves, if you're interested in reading the individual standards, I just like to remind people they are all written down at the beginning of the threshold standards and regional plan document. And each of those lettered and numbered standards represent the individual things that I'll be talking about throughout the day. Next slide, please. So we have 10 broad categories of threshold standards, 148 standards in total. And these are the big things that we as an agency in Tahoe as a partnership are striving to achieve. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, they sit at the top of our regulatory pyramid. Everything else that we do in the agency is in service of these threshold standards and is designed to achieve and maintain those threshold standards. Next slide, please. And they're not just our standards. Kim mentioned and Shannon outlined a lot of the projects, the Environmental Improvement Program, Congress and other acts. Julie had mentioned the reauthorization of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. That act specifically directs the partnership to consider the contributions of projects towards our threshold standards when we're identifying priority projects to go on the LTRA list. Next slide, please. So threshold evaluation. I think Kim briefed the story that I would be talking about the progress being made. The threshold evaluation is actually a little bit bigger and includes bad news sometimes as well. The threshold evaluation is something that we do every 4 years, where we bring to bear all the information that's available to summarize the work that's been done and the current status relative to the goals that we've established for ourselves. Next slide, please. So the 2023 version of this will be our 8th version that we have produced. The first 6 across the top were long reports. We started to experiment with a dashboard style in 2019 to try to attract more readership for that report and make it more accessible and integrated with everything else. And we're continuing that framework in the 2023 evaluation. Next slide, please. At the highest level, the threshold evaluation is trying to tell you 2 things. These are both from the 2019. It's telling you how many of the standards that we have we are in attainment with, and trying to evaluate trend relative to those. Are we going into the right direction? Are we holding ground? Or are we going in the wrong direction? Next slide, please. In order to do so, for each of those indicators, we develop something like a mini scientific report. Most people don't get much farther than the color and the arrow, and that does contain a lot of the information that you need. So as you see this report come out, you'll be looking for the green ones are where we're doing well. Yellow and red is where we're doing not so well. Up and down arrows, again, an up arrow indicates we're trending in the right direction. A down arrow indicates that we're not doing as well. Next slide, please. I always like to acknowledge the report itself is the product of the work of many, many partners in the region. The information that's presented is gathered by all of these partners. It's synthesized by TRPA, but we certainly can't take credit for all of it. The most recent estimates were that it would cost the agency upwards of $17 million to monitor and report. That's an annual allocation to monitor and report on all of our threshold standards. Clearly, that is well outside our monitoring budget. So we are heavily reliant and grateful to all of our partners who contribute in that effort. Next slide, please. So where are we with this year's threshold evaluation? We have been working on the compilation and development of that report since early in the year. We started to send chapters out to peer review at the end of August. We are expecting to send the last chapter out to peer review at the end of this week and to receive almost everything back. I think we're actually a week behind the schedule on the screen right there by the 21st of August. October is when we will get back everything from peer review. Then we have some time internally to make revisions to that document before we'll be releasing the draft document at our November governing board. That's the general process for the release. Next slide, please. But I really want to talk about today the post-release process, because I think you can think of the threshold evaluation as sort of the basin's report card. And as a parent, you know that the report card is only as good as the adjustments you make afterwards. Just having a report card on how you're doing is fairly meaningless if you just let that sit in the corner of your office. The point of it is to make adjustments and improve where you see those yellow and red arrows. And so when we think about the larger plan, do, check, adjust, so the way that we achieve and maintain our thresholds is through our regional plan and through the environmental improvement program. The check part of our process is this threshold evaluation process. And the next step there is the adjustment process. What changes do we need to make to our regional plan, to our environmental improvement program priorities in response to the findings of the threshold evaluation? Next slide, please. A little context here. For years and years, that we're talking 30 years ago, the agency made all of those recommendations itself. It produced the evaluation report. Some partners would say in a silo, and then provided recommendations for both things the agency should change itself and that our partners should change. Naturally, that did not hit many partners all that well. That's not generally the way that a partnership works, that you have one person telling all the others what to do. So what we are proposing this time around is a little bit different, and it's a broader engagement process that would include both public stakeholders and all of the partners that implemented the projects of the EIP. And we're laying this process out in sort of 4 stages and looking for this committee's feedback on this overall process for what we're talking about. So we're proposing first a listening session where post-release, so between December and February, we would do a number of public presentations on the threshold evaluation. This is something we regularly do. We would engage the EIP work groups that actually program and implement the work and ask them what they think the findings of the evaluation mean and where they think the strategic direction should be headed. We would also like to hold public workshops where we do the same and ask the public similar questions. Where are we doing well? What could we improve on? Do you have ideas for us? After we have that listening session, we'd like to take a couple months to synthesize what we've heard through those sessions and formulate recommendations for modification, both of the regional plan or direction to modify parts of the regional plan, as well as the priorities of the environmental improvement program. We would then bring that back to you and to the public for a public review period. We would present those recommendations. Then after some additional public feedback there, we would recommend finalizing those recommendations and then working to incorporate those into our work plan for the agency, as well as to the work plan of our partners in the environmental improvement program. Next slide, please. So one of the things we've wrestled with a lot internally is what type of feedback are we really looking for as part of this process? And there's 4 large areas that I think we're going to be seeking feedback. We want general feedback on the evaluation itself. Do you think we did the right thing? Did we make the right calls here? Then for the individual threshold categories, we want to know what people think we are doing well. Where can we improve what we're doing? Do you have specific policy recommendations? Do you think there's things that are overlooked as EIP priorities, and bring that to the surface? We have also heard and we have acknowledged numerous times that the thresholds themselves need to be updated, and we've done targeted work to do that. We adopted 6 new threshold standards this year in 3 categories. So we want to hear from others where we should focus that attention. Acknowledging that setting goals for a large partnership is not an easy task, and we're not going to update them all overnight. And finally, what additional research do you think we need going forward? Do you think we're directing our limiting monitoring resources to the right place? With that, that's my final slide. I think we'd appreciate any feedback on the process and the content, and I'm also happy to answer questions about the overall evaluation if there are any.
Thank you very much, Dan. That was a really great report. And I know you condensed it. So any questions or comments from any committee members? Seda, Conrad Seda.
Ashley Conrad Seda for the record. Thanks for this thorough report. And I just, this committee always does such great work, and it's really awesome to hear everything you all are doing. I think that, the thing that I find, just having been in government for so long, is that as we move towards being able to collect information more rapidly, right? We can digitize information, we can remotely sense data, right? That trying to match our work with the public and our feedback to the public in a way that matches that kind of faster information loop can be helpful. So while I totally recognize how long it takes to do outreach and incorporate feedback, what I might encourage is, at the end of each one of those meetings, just kind of summarizing what you've heard at the start of the next meeting. So you can kind of iteratively add feedback as you're going around the lake and hearing from folks. And same thing when we think about the regional plan, like we don't need to reopen the entire regional plan. We're slowly updating the regional plan based on conditions on the ground, right? Based on what we know, based on the cost of treating acres, the cost of monitoring threshold, right? So I think communicating to the public in that way, that this is an ongoing process that reflects those changing conditions, reflects the changing needs and demographics of the area, is something that that might not have like an end date. It's going to just be this ongoing process. And it's important to pick an end date so people know you're going to stop this process at some point. But, on another level, it's just continuous what you do. So I think, if you can incorporate the feedback and just kind of iteratively move forward, it might allow you to speed up timelines a little bit. But again, it's a small staff, and so I don't want to put too much pressure on you to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad Seda. Anyone else here in the room or online that might wish to make comments? I would just say I really appreciate the public comment or public participation process that has been identified. I think it's really great to move to that and to have that partnership approach to developing, the next steps. So I just, to add on to to what Ms. Conrad just said, I think that those are really great comments. But just the fact that, this is a new kind of outlook and process in the way that the committee is going to be doing, the way you're going to be doing this work is really important to acknowledge. So with that, I think we may have a few folks in the room and possibly online that may want to make public comments on this item. If any member of the public wishes to address the Environmental Improvement Program Committee on this agenda item, please raise your hand now, either in person or online. And those online could just raise your hand button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. And those of you on the phone, just dial *9 on your phone and you'll be called on and unmuted. So thank you. Okay, come on up.
Right. Excuse me. Good morning, committee chair and staff. Gavin Feiger on behalf of the League of Save Lake Tahoe. our comments are relevant to both of the agenda items for the committee today, thresholds, big picture, and we'll stay big picture for now. We sent in a brief comment yesterday evening, probably didn't get a chance to read it, so I'll just kind of summarize them here for you today. We understand this is going to be a long process and conversation, and always process and conversation with achieving and maintaining thresholds. We really appreciate the effort you put into it. The presentation, Shannon, on the EIP success is fantastic. And then Dan really helped complete the picture there by talking about how thresholds can be even more even better used in to help prioritize EIP projects and to help inform plan and project approvals. So, we'd really like to see, and we've said this over time, we'll continue to say it, and would like to work with staff over the coming year and you committee members to make sure it happens, but really make sure the thresholds are integrated into planning, approvals, and project prioritization. And it's like, you're kind of getting there, but it could be refined, and this is a great opportunity. And we've been talking with Dan and Kim about this, and Julie and a lot of people too. So looking forward to continuing that conversation. Some specific examples, vehicle miles traveled, I won't belabor that, but that's one of the thresholds we've struggled with over time, and we've learned a lot of lessons from that one that can be applied to future threshold updates. Individual projects should not just be approved because they're allowed, because that's assuming that the regional plan is being fully implemented and the mitigation measures are being implemented at the same rate as projects are being approved and developed, and that we're meeting performance measures and benchmarks in the regional plan, which includes achieving and maintaining thresholds. So not just because the project's allowed, but it really needs to improve thresholds, performance, and regional plan performance measures and benchmarks. I think that's something that could be pretty easily integrated into the approval process. I think those are our main points for now. We've had a lot of discussions about just and are very much on the same page about the need to update the thresholds and the SMART process and everything like that. So let's accelerate that, keep it moving, and we're here to support that part too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the room wanting to make a comment? Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name's Maureen Daggett. I've been in Tahoe Meadows all my life, and I have a concern. And I'm looking for some kind of a policy statement from TRPA over this concern. And for starters, I brought this because this is what I'm talking about. Brown. Everybody see.
Excuse me, ma'am. I think we want you to be able to be, yes. Yes, thank you. Okay. Okay. Yes, but if you could, yes, please go to the mic, and just a reminder, ma'am, as a reminder, you have less than 2 minutes now. Yes, and just to clarify, this comment is about the motion that's before us regarding.
That's ground cover. It's also being referred to by Firewise as fuel food, or it's also just recently being called yard trash by the refuse company, and they're offering a 30-pound can to pick it up with. It's also, according to many people I've read, and this is my favorite, Chad Hansen. He is director of the John Muir Project. He backs me on this anxiety and reality that I'm experiencing and seeing all through South Tahoe of the consequences of picking up all that stuff that feeds our soil, that creates our ground, that feeds the trees, that feeds the animals, that feeds everything that lives where we live, that ultimately feeds us and keeps our lake clear. And we're removing it. We've been removing it for 6-8 years in truckloads all through South Shore. In Tahoe Meadows, we've taken thousands of truckloads out. And as a result, in Tahoe Meadows and other places, according to the vector guide, every place in South Shore is brown meadow. Our meadow has been getting muddier and muddier and muddier until now the mud is hard. You can walk, we have a
Excuse
mile.
me, your
of
time
meadow.
has already expired. We appreciate your comments and we'd love to hear them. And I'm sure staff will be reaching out to get more
Okay,
background.
we have
but
a
we do
mile of
not-
meadow and the dust is almost into the lake. 2 more sentences. When the dust gets in the lake, the algae will eat the phosphorus and the nitrogen and it will
Thank you.
spread.
Thank you
It's
very much.
only got about 50 yards to go, less,
Thank you.
maybe in some places 50 feet.
Thank you
And
for your
we're gonna have
comments.
an algae outburst that is going to be, we need a policy on
Okay,
this.
we would, is there anyone else in the room that would like to make comments on this item? Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes, please.
Hi, I won't take 3 minutes. My name is Christina Hill, and I've been a land use planner in the Tahoe Basin for 45 years. It's great that you're updating the thresholds. I appreciate that. I just hope that when the agency is amending their code of ordinances or amending their regional plan, they make findings that shows that they thresholds will be maintained and not exceeded. Because in the past, I haven't seen those written findings with evidence that shows that this project or this amendment to the code or the area plan will cumulatively not impact the thresholds. That is don't do all this for not, let's implement maintaining the thresholds. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room wishing to make a comment? If not, do we have anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised to make public comment.
Okay, great. Any final comments from committee members before we entertain a motion? I believe we can put the motion up on the screen. No motion? No motion. Okay, just direction. Right. Okay, it's just possible comment. All right. Great. Well, then we will move on. Thank you all for your input, and I'm sure staff has been taking copious notes. So we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is upcoming topics. And since this item is informational only, members of the public are welcome to comment at the final public comment item. And I'm going to pass this on to Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've covered most of the upcoming topics that we'll be bringing back to the committee. As you saw in Shannon's presentation and Dan's presentation, we'll keep bringing you updates on progress for project implementation and the EIP implementation. And the engagement process that Dan showed in his presentation is just at the beginning of being designed. So we want to continue to get feedback on how that, the timeline, how we roll out those public engagement sessions, how we bring it back to the committee. We'll keep bringing updates on that whole process to you. I'm excited to have your engagement on the evaluation. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our last opportunity for committee member comments. This is agenda item 6. Any committee member wishing to make a comment? No? Okay, then we will move on to public interest comments, and those that would be here at the podium. If there's anyone that wants to make a general public interest comment, now's the time to come up to the podium. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. Anyone online?
Madam Chair, there are no hands raised.
Okay. All right. Well, for those of the public that have been waiting for our general meeting to start, I think we're getting there. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay,
All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate all your time.